Meet our principal, Dr. Smith.
We'll start now.
1 second, I'll just close the door.
Yes. So we'll start now.
Yeah, sure.
A very good morning to one and all present in this 10-day virtual workshop on research methodology in social sciences, which is organized by Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Bansangha's SM Shetty College of Science, Commerce and Management Studies. The workshop is sponsored by WRC's Indian Council of Social Science Research, ICSSR. After such a motivating session by Dr. P. Subramania during inauguration, we all are now eager to go ahead for understanding and demystifying various aspects of research. The first session of this research workshop is on basics of research. It is very important to understand what is research all about before we start doing one. This session will be extremely helpful for all those who are doing PhD or are intending to do it. This session will enlighten us on the areas right from selection of PhD topic and to preparation of PhD viva. To guide us on the basics of research, we have with us an eminent personality from the field of research, Dr. P.K. Sudarshan. And it's my proud privilege to introduce Sir to this august gathering today. Dr. P.K. Sudarshan is a professor of economics in Goa Business School under Goa University. Presently, he is Vice Dean Research at Goa Business School. He was the head of Department of Economics at Goa University for 2 terms. He has completed his PhD in economics from Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai in 1996 as a UGC research scholar. He has about 30 years of teaching and research experience. He was the chairperson of Board of Studies in Economics at Goa University for several years. 13 students have completed PhD under his able guidance, and 5 students are currently working for their PhDs. He has several publications to his credit in reputed national and international journals. Recently, one of his co-authored books has been published by Taylor and Francis. He has completed a few research projects too. His area of interest are microeconomics, international economics. He was a member of Goa University Court and the Academic Council and is chairperson for many academic committees. So we are so honored to have you with us for this first session of our workshop. So before I hand over the session to Dr. Sudarshan, I'd request all the participants, if they come across any queries or questions, please put it on the chat box. We will be taking either at the end of the session or as suggested by the resource person. So can we move over to our resource person and hear from him?
Thank you, Dr. Nidhi. Thank you, Dr. Liji, and also thank you, Principal Sir. So my today's topic is basics of PhD research. Let me tell you all that I'm just sharing my experience in PhD research. It's not based on any textbook or any paper published by someone, but my own experience in PhD research. When I say my own experience in PhD research, participants might think that experience at what levels? I count my experience at 3 levels. One is as a full-time PhD student at IIT Bombay. I was there as a UGC research fellow for 5 years. I have gained a lot of experience from my colleagues, from my friends, from my faculty members and all. I count that as one of the major experiences that I have received in the field of research. Secondly, as a research guide. As a research guide, I have completed successfully 13 PhDs, and some students are presently working for their PhDs. And that was a great experience for me. I have learned a lot from my students. And also, I'm a member of a doctoral research committee. In Goa University, it is called DRCs, because every PhD student has to present their progress of their PhD to this research committee. So I've been in these committees more than 100 students over the years. So I got an opportunity to know what other students are doing, how they are pursuing their research, and how different people look at researchers, what are the mistakes they commit, and what are good things they do. All those things I could gather some information about all those things. Thirdly, my experiences as a PhD examiner in various universities and institutions in the country. I have evaluated perhaps more, maybe more than 100 theses. So I got to know how students or scholars in other institutions are doing research. Is it different from what our students do in our university? Like that, different levels, very high standard institutions thesis I have received, and also I have received thesis from state universities also. So the differences in quality of PhDs being done also I could gather. So these are my experiences, and I'm trying to share my experience. The presentation involves various aspects of topic selection, selection of guide, literature review, methodology, data sources, presentation of results in various chapters, referencing, even appearing for PhD YOC examination. Okay, I'll change my internet to some other, it's showing some another service provider. Okay, the first aspect which I'm going to discuss is topic selection. All of us know that topic selection is one of the important aspects in PhD research. How does one select the research topic? That's a very important question. Generally, we say that once the student selects a right topic, then PhD is half done. A wrong topic is selected means the student has to struggle with the topic, and he may face or he may confront with many problems, difficulties. So topic selection is very, very important. Generally, the guides expect the topic to come from the student. Rarely guides suggest any topic to the PhD students, because the PhD students are going to work with the topic for more than 4 or 5 years. So the topic should be from the area of his, her interest. That's the reason guides generally don't suggest topics to the PhD students. So then the question comes, what is meant by the area of research interest? What is meant by area of research interest? Each student or each scholar who approaches a university department or a guide should have an area of research interest. Area of research interest means the student should have good reading in that area. Student must have gone through at least 3-4 books or 10-15 research articles in that area. And he should be in a position to speak about the research area, research topic, at least for 10-15 minutes. That much knowledge he must have. Sometimes students come, and if you ask them, what's your area of interest? They say, sir, my area of interest is international economics. my area of interest is agricultural economics. Somebody has raised hand, I think.
Yeah, excuse
Yes.
me, sir. Can you
Yeah.
make it slideshow so that, I mean, the visibility of the slides are better?
Okay.
Yes.
It's okay now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the students should have some knowledge about the area in which the student is planning to do research. That's what we meant by area of research interest. Sometimes students come and we ask them, they say that, sir, we are interested in doing PhD in international economics or doing PhD in agricultural economics. But what happens if you ask them, what do you want to do, or what is your topic, or what do you know about this? They are blank. That means that is not actually the area of research interest. Okay. And another point which I want to make here is that better and easier to select a topic from an area where research has already been done. Sometimes students have a misconception that PhD means we should do something entirely new. It's true, we should do something new. That's true, I agree with that. But it's not necessary that the area of research itself should be entirely new. So once one student approached me and he wanted to do PhD, I asked him, what's your area of interest? Or what's your topic? He told me he wanted to do economics of rocket launching or economics of satellite launching. Then I asked him, why you want to do that? He said, sir, nobody has done PhD in that area. Then I told him, okay, you try to frame a research problem, you make some research questions and read around 4 or 5 articles in that area and come. So he did not come afterwards because he could not get any articles related to that particular topic, because that's not a researchable area in the framework of economics. So sometimes students select certain topics which they consider as entirely new, but what happens, that topic may not be researchable, or that topic may not have sufficient data, or it may not have enough theoretical background. In that case, their research would not get progressed. So as young researchers, it's always better to select a topic from an area where research has been done. The advantages are like this. A lot of research articles we can get from that area. So review of literature is easy. There are a lot of work has been done. So to find out research gap is easy. We come to know what are the data sources, what are the methodologies used in that area. So that helps the student to pursue PhD. Okay, so better not to go for an entirely new research area. Ideally, the area of interest of the student and guide should match. Okay, then only the student can expect some guidance from the guide. If area of interest of the guide and area of interest of the student are different, and if PhD is to be done with that particular guide, he may not be able to help the student much. So that should be kept in mind by the student. Now, what are the factors that determine topic selection? Obviously, the relevance of the topic. The topic should be relevant. It should be socially relevant. It should be relevant to our country. Now, as per NEP, National Education Policy 2020, the students are supposed to select topics which are of importance to our country. That would help our country's policy making. So relevance is very important. Second one is researchable. Researchable means what? Short topic should involve a clear research question. It should have a clear research question. There should be a research question which is very clear. If such a research question is not there, that means the topic is not researchable. Topic should have a theoretical background. It means that topic should be having some theory in the relevant field. I mean, topic should be related to some theory in the relevant field. Otherwise, the thesis would not look very attractive. Then another aspect is that data availability and skills at the disposal. Whether data is available. Sometimes we select topic looks very attractive, but when students start actually doing the work, they find that data is not available. Then how to carry out the research questions, or how to find answers to the research question becomes difficult. Another important aspect is skills at the disposal. What are the skills that the student has? Suppose we take a topic where too much of quantitative analysis is required, but the student doesn't have that much skills, then he ends up in problem. Okay. Another important point is that should be able to justify our topic in our discipline. Because if I'm doing PhD in economics, I should be in a position to justify that this topic is in economics. Very often I have seen the experts asking, how can you say that this work is in your discipline? Whether this, how can you justify that your work is in economics? If I say that your work is in sociology, how do you refute that? So we should use concepts, tools, and methods that we use in our discipline so that we can justify that the topic is in our discipline. See, it's possible to do interdisciplinary research, but one should be very clear what are the disciplines involved. Sometimes students say that I'm doing interdisciplinary research, but they may not be very clear what are the disciplines involved in it. And we have to justify why we need an interdisciplinary research. So that should be clear to us, because this is the research problem. These are my research questions. And in order to answer these research questions or these research problems, I have to have the support of this discipline. So I'm doing interdisciplinary research. Okay. So my advice to the research scholars is that if someone wrongly selected a topic, better to change it. Suppose after already spent 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, and if research is not progressing, then better to change the topic and go for a new topic. I have seen scholars, they have changed their topic after 2 years, 2.5 years, and selected a good topic, have done very good PhD. Next one is selection of guide. Selection of guide. Selection of research guide is very crucial, very crucial. It's very, very important. Good guide is a must for a good PhD work. Now the question is, who is a good guide or who is not a good guide? All those things, all those issues come. Now let us see what are the factors that determine the selection of research guide. The first and most important factor is area of interest of the prospective guide. If I'm planning to do a PhD in international economics, I should select a guide who is working in the area of international economics. Suppose I'm interested in doing PhD in international economics, but I'm joining under a guide who is working in agricultural economics, then we don't get much support from the guide. So area of interest of the prospective guide we have to see. And how do we know the area of interest of the prospective guide? Or how do we know that the guide is good or whether the guide is not good? Or how do we identify, how do we determine the area of interest of the guide? So we can see his publications, okay? The publication record of the guide would help to know us whether the guide is of a reputed person or what is his area of interest, etc. Okay, and also if we go through the publications, we also come to know the quality of the research output produced by the guide, where he has published his articles, whether these articles are published in high impact factor journals or not, or whether he publishes articles in highly reputed journals. Then we can see that this guide is good guide and he's producing good academic output, so it's better to join under him. And also by going through the publications, we come to know his writing skills. Writing skills are important because at the time of correcting the thesis and all, guides writing skills matters, because guides help the student. Guides go through the thesis 3-4 times. So his editing skills, his writing skills are important. All those we come to know through the publications. And another important aspect is data analysis skills of the guide. Data analysis skills of the guides should be reflected in his publications. So if we go through the publications, we come to know whether he's good in quantitative techniques or not. And a research scholar, if he's interested in doing PhD with a lot of quantitative stuff in it, then should look for a guide who has better or good quantitative knowledge. That we can come to know from his publications. It's also better to know his association with academic bodies, institutions. In economics. We can see whether he is a member of Indian Economic Association, or whether he's a member of Indian Econometric Association, or whether he's a member of Indian Ecological Economics Association. That means his academic interest is wide, and he knows people, and he has connections, and he has real research interest. All these help the research scholar by way of getting help from other institutions, getting data from other institutions, or getting help from other scholars in the field. Okay. And also it is better to see the overall personality of the guide. Whether the guide is an approachable person, good person, kind person, all these things matter. Sometimes person may be very good academically, but personality may not be that good, maybe very tough, not kind, all those things. So better you have an interaction with the students who are working under him towards their PhDs. So generally what scholars do, they meet 3-4 scholars who are working under him and try to interact with them and try to understand about the guide. It's true that you would not get full details, but some idea one can get. Now data sources. See, data sources are very important, because I know many PhD students are their PhD works are held up because data is not available. Okay, there is a wrong perception that the PhDs are good only if they use primary data. It's not correct. Okay, you can decide first research topic, then look for data sources. We have to first decide what is the research topic, then see to address those research questions whether data is available. Okay, we have to look for data sources. If secondary data is available, we can go for that. Secondary data is collected by experts and it's available already. So we don't have to spend much time in collecting data manually. You get more time in analyzing already existing data. Okay. So secondary data is also good. If certain cases only primary data is possible, secondary data may not be possible. Okay. So go for primary data if secondary data is not available. I don't insist like that. I mean, that depends on the scholar. But what I would like to say is that there are a lot of secondary data available in subjects like economics, and also that one can make use of if it's difficult to collect primary data. See, there are different sources of secondary data for economics, commerce, and management researchers. It includes World Bank, OECD data, WTO data, UN data, UNCTAD data, Comtrade data. Okay, there is Bloomberg data. These are all sources from the international level. Okay, and in Indian cases also we have a lot of data sources. Reserve Bank website gives a lot of data for economics researchers. National Sample Survey Organization is there. Census data is there. Annual Survey of Industry data is there. CMI Provost data is there. CMI Outlook is there. EPW database is there. Ministry of Commerce, trade-based data are there. So there are a lot of data sources. There is national level family health survey data. Many students are doing research using that data. There may be many other sources of data too. So one can use those data which are readily available, and that may simplify your research process, because otherwise you have to spend around 6 to 8 months in data collection, going around and collecting that. If secondary data is available, and it should be from the relevant source, for example, here RBI, NSSO, Census, they're all reliable, because these are all collected by government agencies, and we assume they are all reliable sources. Okay. See, and students who are young scholars who are doing PhD full time and they want to get employment in good companies and all, they can become expert in extracting secondary data. Okay, suppose somebody is using Bloomberg data, let them learn how to extract data. So some companies employ them, okay. Or suppose somebody is expert in extracting NSSO data, some research institutions employ them, or somebody is good in extracting ASI data and using it. That helps them to find job. And also your value in the research field will go up. Many people approach you to get inputs from you to know how to extract this data. And your strength as a researcher will increase if you are expert in extracting some data sources. Okay. So if you are using primary data, then make sure that you follow proper sampling procedure. Okay, and describe the same. When we evaluate this, we very often find that the students do not mention or do not explain what sampling procedures they have used. Okay, so better to use random sampling, because random sampling is good because it will have better statistical properties. But may not be possible always to have random sampling method to collect data. Okay, but if possible, that is better. See, sometimes students mention multi-stage random sampling method followed, but they fail to explain that properly. There may be multi-stage, but random sampling may not be there. Or there may be random sampling, but multi-stage may not be there. So if you are saying multi-stage random sampling, what are the different stages we have to explain in the thesis under the methodology chapter, and how or what random procedure followed, that should also be mentioned. Okay. Very often we find students using judgment sampling or convenience sampling. When we say judgment sampling or convenience sampling, we have to convince or we have to justify why we are going for judgment sampling or why we are going for convenience sampling. So what is the rationale behind that? That we have to justify in the methodology chapter. So go for a reasonable size of sample. And sometimes I have seen in DRC meetings, in our research meetings, some research DRC members suggest go for 600 or go for 800 sample size and all. It's not required according to me. See, around 380, 400, and a sample size should be sufficient. There are certain formula, there are certain menu-driven software where you can give us population size and it gives you sample size, but it varies between 380 to 400, 420 and all. Okay, so going for huge sample size may not help you in research, because 400 can provide you almost all statistical properties required. See, if you are collecting primary data, try to collect quantitative information as far as possible. Quantitative information as far as possible. Quantitative information means what? For example, age, wage, income, experience, years of education, etc. These are quantitative variables. Because if you collect more quantitative variables, you can put these variables into statistical analysis, because age, wage, income, experience, etc. means you can use that for calculating mean, standard deviation, coefficient of variation, correlation, regression, etc. Okay, if it is qualitative data, it has limited statistical applicability, because nominal data, ordinal data, interval scale data, all these have limited statistical properties. Though different people use, with nominal ordinal data, we can't use mean, standard deviation, or correlation, regression, etc. Correlation, I mean normal correlation, Pearson's coefficient of correlation we can't use, because nominal data won't support that, or ordinal data won't support that. So your data should match with your methodology. What methodology you are looking for, accordingly you should select data. Certain methodologies you use may be supporting only quantitative variables, then you should collect quantitative data only. So this all should go in a synchronized way. I mean, should see, what methodology, what data, what objective, all are interconnected. Now, next one is selection of methodology. Selection of methodology. Okay. Selecting proper methodology is very crucial, isn't it? The strength of the thesis depends on the strength of the methodology. Okay. So generally statistical and econometric models are used, or it is better to use some statistical techniques or econometric models. So that gives your thesis more value. Sometimes you find thesis is just giving only tables, giving only percentages and many graphs, because in that case, we are not doing any analysis. We are just observing. Graph means it helps you to observe data, observe pattern, and say something. But we are not doing any kind of hypothesis testing. If you want to do some kind of hypothesis testing, then statistical and econometric models are required. And many experts for, those who come as examiners at the Viva, they ask, you have written around 300 pages, but no statistical tools are used to test a hypothesis. You are just observed and said, this is better than that or something. But what is the statistical significance of this? You are not done. Such questions come. So better to use some statistical econometric models. PhD, we generally take 4 to 5 years. If you don't know, we can learn. It's not a great thing. With statistical software, econometric software, we need not manually calculate. We can get the results. What we need is that we must know what is that theory. If it is t-test, we must know what is t-test, how to interpret the t-value, and how to make conclusion. Okay, that's possible for without much background, but we have to learn. We have to spend some time on that, rather than saying that I don't know statistical tools and I'm not using. I use only tables and percentages like that. Okay, so it is important to ascertain your skills before you select methodology. So up to what level we can learn also, we may have some limits. Okay, so suppose we have come from a non-quantitative background, then there are certain constraints for us. So in that case, we must not be very ambitious to use highly advanced methodology, then we may end up in problem. But certain simple techniques we can use. Suppose you are weak in quantitative techniques, better use simple statistical tools and hypothesis testing like t-test, set test, chi-square test, Mann-Whitney test, ANOVA test, simple correlation test, etc. These are all very, very simple tests that you can do through, even you can do with the help of Excel, or you can use SPSS and do it. Okay. If you are good in quantitative techniques, then you may try for advanced trigonometric techniques like multiple regression, error correction model, VAR models, GARC models, etc., etc. And use these techniques only if situation warrants. If the research problem under study needs to use these techniques, then only use them. Should not use a technique just for using it. Sometimes we find people coming with the technique first. They come with a technique. So I want to use this. And they make topics for that and they collect data for that, like that. Okay. But it should be reverse. I mean, first select research problem and see data and variables and see your research question. And if your research question requires the use of any of this model, then only you need to use. Okay. And if you are using qualitative data has limited applicability, but like ordinal data, scale-based data, Likert scale data and all has limited applicability. But this fact analysis, structural equation modeling, logic model, probit models, etc., can be used with qualitative data also. Okay, that one has to see what data is available and what all techniques we can use. So the selection methodology, therefore, depends on the type of data used for the study, whether primary data or secondary data, time series data or cross-section data, qualitative data and quantitative data. If you are going to use cross-section data, then many of the techniques which I mentioned, like this I mentioned, or this error correction model, R models, GARC models, all these we can't use if you're using primary data. That's all time series data based methodologies. And so if you are using panel data, then if your data source is a panel structure, then you can use fixed effects model, random effects model, and all. So data determines what method you are using, or what method you are using. Accordingly, you have to collect data, something like that. So both are interlinked. So it's a must that I insist. I mean, I make this point with strong conviction that the research scholar must know what technique he is using in his thesis. See, there are different, now there are different ways, there are outsourcing available, there are people who do data analysis and give to the research scholars by taking money. But in the process, the research scholar is not learning anything. Okay. So the research scholar should learn whatever techniques use, the research scholar use, that should be learned. It may take some time, but should learn. Take help from people to learn, not to take help from people to get the data analyzed. First learn, do it ourselves or do it yourselves, and get the result. The point is that if you don't know the technique which you have applied in your thesis, your confidence level will be very low. You won't feel very easy to talk to other people about your research, because they might ask you what technique you have used and what does it mean, what data you used, what software you used. If you don't know that, you can't talk to them, you can't explain to them. So that brings your confidence level. And even at the time of Viva, you will be too much scared because you don't know the technique which you have used. You have outsourced it. And you might be worried. If the expert asks in detail about all these, then the situation will be very bad. Okay, in front of others, our image will go down, right? So those things will happen. So maybe we are using simple techniques or small techniques, but whatever we use, we should be clear about it. Okay. So don't decide the technique first and look for topic, but choose first select the topic, then your objectives, research question, then see what technique we can use. Now the next one is selection of software. There are many statistical software available. There are many statistical software available. See, all these softwares are more or less similar, but certain softwares has certain advantage over others, and certain softwares are useful for some kind of data. For example, if you are using time series data, then eViews is good. I'm talking about econometric software. Okay, since I'm from economics field, I know that there are some researchers from other fields also, but these softwares are commonly used by all. So if you are using time series data, then eViews, Chasm, Gretel, etc. can be used. If you are using cross-section data, then SPSS is better, or Stata would look better, or Gretel we can use. And if it is panel data, LIMDUP, Stata, these are commonly used. But all other softwares also have this, but this may have certain more features that helps the research. Okay. So if somebody wants to do fact analysis and structural equation model, there is one software called MOS, and that's the same company that that makes SPSS makes that. So depending upon what kinds of data analysis we are going to do, accordingly we can select, we can look for a software. Now R software has become very, very popular. And if one can learn R software, then he can do whatever exercises or whatever analysis he wants to do with the help of R. Then we don't have to use these paid other softwares. R is freely available too. But one has to learn little. I don't know R software, but that's what I'm hearing from others. But it's not difficult. If one tries for 1 month or 2 months, he can or she can learn R software. And this Gretel is a free software that's freely available, freely downloadable software. It has almost all facilities of all other software. So in our university, we use this Gretel to teach econometrics. Okay. So I would advise you all that try to be an expert in at least one software, rather than spending your whole time in learning all softwares, no meaning. So try to be an expert, very good in one software, so that you can solve problems easily and you have expertise to deal with that software. If something is not working, you can easily figure it out because you have been using that. Because most softwares have the same function. So why to learn 2 or 3? One software you try to become expert. If you want to use, for example, if you know this SPSS, eViews won't be much difficulty. You can know a little bit, but focus on one so that you become expert on that. Okay. Most softwares are paid softwares. Okay. So you have to decide whether your university or college has access to it. Suppose eViews you want to use, it cost, I think, 7 lakhs or something. Suppose your college doesn't have subscription or your university doesn't have subscription to it, and then deciding to use that will be a problem. Mainly students are using pirated one, but we don't know when that company catches us and stops giving that facility. That is illegally we are doing, isn't it? So what is accessible, we have to use that. And also don't depend too much on other institutions, other colleges and all, because see, research means you should have much flexibility. If you depend on other college, then when you go there, the concerned person may not be there. Then they may say that no, principal's permission is to be sought. All those things, you waste a lot of time traveling there, spending time. So use the software which you can get easy access. So in that case, free softwares would be better. If your college has, then better to use that facility. That's good for college also. Then literature review. I'm not spending time on literature review here because there is a session coming in the afternoon on literature review. So I'll discuss at that time. Then, okay, so that we'll see that. Then hypothesis test. Okay, so hypothesis testing is an important aspect of PhD research. That is the essence of PhD research. If you don't test hypothesis using proper statistical methods, our thesis may not be considered as very good. Okay? So the purpose of statistical models or econometric models we use in our thesis is to test hypothesis. See, we are using correlation as a statistical rule. What we are doing in correlation? We are testing the hypothesis that whether two variables are correlated or not. So all statistical methods, techniques we use are used for hypothesis testing. So if you are using a statistical techniques, indirectly we are testing hypothesis. Regression, ANOVA, chi-square, all these statistical tools we are using for hypothesis testing only. So it scientifically tests whether two variables are correlated, or in regression, if one variable increases by 1 unit, how much the other variable would increase. This hypothesis testing is required because we are following samples. On the basis of samples, we are going to generalize. Since we are using samples, we have to test statistically whether the sample we collected is supporting our hypothesis or not. Okay. So correlation means we'll have two hypotheses. One is null hypothesis and other one is alternate hypothesis. Or null hypothesis could be that consumption and income are not related. That is null. And alternate hypothesis is what? Consumption and income are positively related. So then we do the correlation analysis and we get the correlation value and we get the corresponding test statistic. Then we compare that with the table value and we decide whether there is correlation between these two variables or not, or whether the correlation between these two variables are significant or not. Okay. So unless we do the hypothesis testing, if we report correlation, the researchers won't accept that result because it's not statistically tested whether there is correlation between these two variables. Okay. So like that, there are various tests. So all techniques which I mentioned, even structural equation model, factor analysis, all these are doing hypothesis testing only. Okay. But we have to mention hypothesis because when you do correlation analysis, that software doesn't mention what is hypothesis, what is null, what is alternate. That researcher has to state this is null hypothesis, this is alternate hypothesis. So it is important to know what is null hypothesis, what is alternate hypothesis, how to state null hypothesis, how to state alternate hypothesis. It's all very simple things one can understand. And also we must know what is one-tail test, two-tail test. What is type 1 error? What is type 2 error? What is level of significance? Should have some idea of this. Okay, should have some idea of this. What does it mean? We should know. Then only we enjoy doing statistical analysis. Unless we know things, no, we don't enjoy doing that work. If we know, we enjoy. We sit hours. Okay. Then comes the thesis preparation. Thesis preparation. So this is also very important. What we do in terms of analysis, review of literature, data collection and all becomes attractive when we present it properly. See, we have done good work. We have done a lot of things. We collected a lot of data, a lot of analysis we did, but presentation is not good. That means we don't get the appreciation that we otherwise deserve. Because the examiner is going through only the report, final report. If report is not properly presented or not being shown properly, then examiner doesn't know whether what you did, what all things you did. Suppose you did good statistical analysis, but you presented in a shabby way in tables without proper information, without proper column heading, or without proper row heading, without proper title, then whatever result you have got becomes, it's not presented properly. Okay. So I thought I would give a sketch of how to present your thesis. It depends. There is no hard and fast rule. Different people can look at different way. This is a model which I thought would work better, but somebody can say that, no, this is not good. This is better. I don't argue with them. This is what I think would look better. This is, I told you in the beginning, this is from my experience having gone through different theses and having students have worked under me and how we did, and also what other researchers have done. Considering all those, I thought this would be better. So plan your thesis in 7 or 8 chapters. 2 less and 2 more chapter, 2 long chapters also not. Too many numbers also not. So ideally better to have 3 major objectives. That's my thinking. Have 3 major objectives. When you state your objectives, don't state 10 objectives or 12 objectives. We can't fulfill 10, 12 objectives in a thesis because we have time constraint, we have resource constraint, many other constraints we are in. Okay, so 12 objectives and all, it's very difficult to fulfill. So have a 3 major objectives. Means 3 major research questions. And convert these 3 objectives into 3 main chapters without overlapping. Okay, so these 3 objectives can be converted into 3 main chapters that I'm coming. So the first chapter is an introductory chapter. That all of you agree, and introductory chapter is a must. So afterwards, I'm going to show what all things we should include. Second chapter, I would suggest a review of literature chapter. And third chapter, methodology. Depending upon the situation. Depending upon the situation means if your methodology is a common methodology, you are using same methodology or common methodology for all your chapters, then you can give a separate chapter, methodology chapter. I'm going to discuss that. Then chapter 4 is a background chapter. Okay, I'm going to deal with that. Then chapter 5 will be core chapter that pertains to objective 1. Chapter 6 will be dealing with objective 2. Chapter 7 will be dealing with objective 3. And 8th chapter will be summary and conclusions. So these are just suggested chapter scheme I have already mentioned, and there is no hard and fast rule. One should follow this. One can add 1 more chapter as a core chapter. Also, suppose you have 4 objectives, you can add 1 more chapter. Okay, and this background chapter depends. If you need, you can include, and if you don't require that, you need not include. Now let us see. So ideally, core chapters. Okay, so 7, 8 chapters are sufficient. Very important to give a proper thesis title. Title is very important. Looking at the title, people try to evaluate our skill or our expertise in the field. Don't give very lengthy thesis title that goes into half page or something like that. Should be very precise, to the point, and at the same time, it should convey what is going to be inside. Okay. So generally, most universities, when you start, you give a title, then after 1 year, after the coursework and all, you can revise your title. In our university, even at the time of pre-synopsis, we can slightly change the title. Because see, when we work 3-4 years, we find that the way in which we planned did not work. So we maybe we want to make certain small changes in the title. In our university, that is permitted, but I'm not sure in all other universities that works. And the title should convey broadly what is there inside the thesis. Okay. And not necessary that all aspects or all objectives are reflected in the title. Sometimes you see long title that depicts what all things did inside. I mean, that's not needed. So it should be very precise and attractive. And let us see what all things we should include in the introductory chapter. So introductory chapter shall be around 15 to 20 pages only, and that should showcase your thesis. By going through the introductory chapter, the person should get what is going to come. It's like a trailer, okay? It should showcase your thesis. It should be very, very brief. Introduction means it should be very brief. It should cover background of the study, statement of the research problem, highlighting research questions, objectives, hypothesis, scope of the study, data and methodology in brief. Methodology chapter is going to come later, detail, and chapter outline and limitations. Okay. Generally, people write introduction after having written all other chapters, though we are supposed to write in the beginning, but because then only we get an idea of how to put, I mean, then only that introductory chapter would clearly represent what are going to come afterwards. Okay, so what I have found from evaluating many theses are that research problem is not clearly stated. Research problem, there may be subheading saying that statement of the research problem. But if you go through that, we find that the research problem is not clearly stated. That research issue is not highlighted, but something is written into 3 paragraphs, but it's not touching the core research issue. That kind of feeling sometimes we get. And objectives are not very clear and precise. If you read objectives, we don't get clear idea what the researcher actually want to do. What is his objective is not very clear. Hypotheses are not clearly stated. Not hypothetical at all. Sometimes hypothesis is put in such a way that it is certain, not hypothetical at all. Okay. And hypothesis we should put in a testable form. Hypothesis, once we state, means to be tested. So that statement as per the statistical procedure norms we should put. Okay. I have mentioned ideally 3 or 4 objectives are all right. And review of literature chapter. This we are going to see later. So review of literature is an essential part of the thesis. It can be second chapter because that provides background. So it's very important not to make this chapter a boring one. Generally, people say that reading review of literature chapter is very boring. Most examiners find it very boring to read review of literature chapter because it's not properly written. Okay, if it is presented thematically connecting various developments in the field of study, and if it's written like a story with proper sequence and coherence, then it's interesting to read. If it is somebody picked up some literature from somewhere and just fitted like this, no connection, nothing, then it's a boring one. So we should not make that boring. So we are going to see in the second session that ideally 25 to 30 pages is more than enough. Okay, and should not be too much because literature is there a lot of, and some people want to make that thesis big one because people think making a big thesis means work is good. So they include too many literature, too many papers, and make a review of literature chapter 50, 60 pages. 25 to 30 pages are enough, because what we expect is the essence of it. Okay. So we have find around 50, 60 articles. We have to limit somewhere. Some areas, a lot of literature is there. So we have to limit somewhere. Only then, if too much literature is there, we may review only literature of the last 10 years or last 20 years. Like that, somewhere we have to stop. And should elaborate on summary and research gap. That we are going to see in the afternoon. But now methodology. See, if methodology is common to all chapters, better to give it as a separate chapter. See, if it is primary data-based study, mostly we have to explain how data is collected, sample size, description about sample village, sample units, all those things. That's common to all chapters. That's common to all chapters. So we can give a methodology in one chapter. Okay. And what are the tools used? What are the variables? All those things we can give in one chapter. Methodology can be part of each chapter too. If you are employing different methodology for different chapters, we can give methodology in each chapter. See, one may be using multiple regression model for one particular chapter. So we can explain that in that chapter. Some may be using maybe structural equation. Some may be using GARP model. Then that can be explained in second chapter. Some may be using fixed effects, random effects model in another chapter. That can be explained in that chapter. Okay. Recently, I have got a thesis, and there I found the results and discussion one chapter only. And that chapter is divided into various sections, section A, B, C, D, F, G, and all. And I found it very, very messy, because not able to capture what they wanted to tell. So it could have been presented used in the study, techniques and econometric tools used. Want to say something?
No, in between, we couldn't hear your voice. That's why. Just for a few seconds. 1 second or so. That's it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So another thing which I wanted to mention is that when we explain statistical tools and all, we should not explain mean, standard deviation, correlation, etc. I have seen in theses they explain what is mean, sigma x bar by n, what is standard deviation, what is correlation. These are standard techniques that everybody knows, isn't it? No need to explain what is mean, what is standard deviation, what is correlation, what is regression. This everybody knows. So we should not waste our pages and time and energy to explain that in the thesis. If we explain that, means our value is going down by explaining that. But we can explain if something is new there. For example, a scholar is proposing a new index to measure poverty. He developed a new index, so he can explain that it's something new. Suppose somebody is doing PhD on financial inclusion, and suppose he developed an index to measure financial inclusion. He can explain that in the methodology chapter. Okay. And econometrics model, it's a regression model is common, but if you are using different variables, independent variables and all, and then we can present that model, because it's an entirely different one. Okay, so all those things we can explain, but we should not explain what is alpha, what is beta, and alpha, beta, and all. It's all standard measures, and everybody knows that, or those who read this are supposed to know that. So we should not explain how we got alpha, how we got beta. Okay, we should not explain what is t value, what is standard error, what is r square, because all these are standard rules, and standard measures. Now, a background chapter. Background chapter is not necessary. In certain cases, we may require. Suppose this is on India-ASEAN FTA, Free Trade Agreement. Suppose the thesis is on India-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement. Then, see, many readers would not know what is this India-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, may not know what is Free Trade Agreement, all those things. So a background chapter would help readers to get some idea about what this free trade agreement is. So in the background, we can give WTO provisions regarding regional trade agreements, growth of regional trade agreements over the years. Okay, this we can show with some graphs, some patterns, and some simple analysis also we can do. But we don't expect much analysis in this chapter because this is to provide a background. Okay? So this will provide the reader adequate background of the study. Then he would be in a position to appreciate other chapters which are coming later. Sometimes we see 2-3 background chapters. That is not encouraged. See, background chapter should be very precise, only one chapter. Giving too many background chapters is very bad. It's unnecessary. I'll give you one example. Suppose somebody is studying cooperative banks in North Goa district. All of you know that Goa has only 2 districts. One is South Goa, another one is North. So somebody is supposed to study cooperative banks, urban cooperative banks in North Goa district. So suppose somebody is giving profile of cooperative banks in India as one chapter, profile of cooperative banks in South India, another chapter, profile of cooperative banks in Goa, another chapter, profile of cooperative banks in North Goa, another chapter. This is very funny. I mean, we should not do like that. Okay, maybe we can give one background of in one chapter we can give. I have seen, that suppose somebody is doing state finance corporation. So it starts with the center, then comes to, some other states, then comes to the state, then district. Unnecessarily, we are wasting pages and without contributing anything, without any value addition, we are just filling already existing data, just putting in tables and wasting our time and energy. So I would suggest not to waste time and energy to provide chapter on profile too much, profile on different aspects. Okay. And also profile on the state, for example, I'm giving, so somebody is studying banking in Goa. So it's a very customary, customary means many people do. If somebody is doing anything about Goa or anything about Maharashtra, then unnecessarily one chapter on profile of Goa or profile of Maharashtra. That means their geographical conditions, political conditions, different districts, per capita income, all those details. All these details are available in the public domain. We need not give that in the thesis because it may not be very relevant. Okay, because here the study is banking. So why to give geographical conditions, political conditions? If anybody can Google and get all those information. So we, as a research scholar, we should not waste our time in providing all those information. So sometimes we see chapter on profile of the state, another chapter profile of district, profile of village, etc. So these are not needed. So only if it is necessary, we should give, and that should be very relevant. And core chapters, 5, 6, 7 core chapters, okay? See, the chapters are properly titled, and title should convey what is covered inside, okay? And don't give long titles like paragraph. These are all very important. By seeing the title only, that we get the impression about thesis. If title is badly put, then we don't feel like reading further. Okay. And the results are to be presented in tables with table number, table title. And each column and each row should carry name, should include the units, whether it's in rupees, whether it's in dollars, whether it's in lakhs, whether it's in million, billion, kilogram, kilometer, percentage, absolute value, all. Once I got one thesis there, throughout thesis, the tables don't have the value, what value, whether it is rupees or in crores, rupees crores or rupees, or in dollar, and no proper column heading and row heading, nothing. So I had to send back suggesting him to revise and put everything correctly and send back. Okay, so these are very important. So table numbers should be there correctly ordered, because there is list of tables you have to give in the beginning. And table should be properly made. Should not be like in between one column is blank or it's not properly put. Should be very neat and clear and should look good. And sometimes we find data is given tables and graphs. Throughout thesis, sometimes you find one table, one graph, one table, one graph. Sometimes I feel, why do we give tables and graphs? The same information we are presenting in two different ways. Nothing new we are showing. See, sometimes graph helps, because suppose we are studying India's export for last 30 years. If you see the graph, we can make out trend, or we can see something. This is, for example, the male 40%, female 60%. In table that is given, in pie diagram also that is given. Why do we give that? Because 40-60% we can make out. So such things should not do. I mean, that won't add any value to the thesis, and that will bring down our image in the eyes of the examiner. Okay. Okay. Then, so each chapter, except introduction and conclusion. Introduction and conclusion, I told you around 15 pages would be sufficient. Introduction and conclusion. Okay, but all other pages should be around 25 to 30 pages only. That in 25 to 30 pages, you should be in a position to convey your results and summary everything. 25 to 30 means maybe 35 also. And it should not be like what I'm saying, it should not be like one chapter is 65 pages, another chapter is 5 pages. It should not happen, because it should not happen. What I mean is that if it happens, that means we did not plan organizing the material properly. Therefore, it comes like. Okay. See, what I will do, I may take this full time here, and maybe next session we can have questions on this, or you can collect questions which you are getting in the chat box, and we'll discuss in the next session. Okay. Next session, we don't require this much time. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. So this time I'll go up to 150.
I think very handful of questions. There are a lot of compliments though. As you wish. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll do that because I need another 15 minutes. So, all right. Yeah. So after that, afternoon we'll have more time, because there we don't have much to discuss. Okay?
Sure, sir. I'll make a note of the questions.
Yeah. So the present results in a logical and sequential way. Whatever results we present should be very logical and sequential. Should have connection. It should come one after another. It should be like a movie. I mean, story is told. I mean, told in a movie. How it's told. It should be sequence. Otherwise, movie becomes boring and people go out. So thesis should also be there. There should be logical. There is sequential way. There is connectedness between various things we tell. So if you are presenting regression results, specify whether you have mentioned t values, standard errors, or p values in the table. Sometimes regression results are shown, and some values are given. We don't know whether it is t values, whether it is standard errors, whether it is p values. So we have to specify values in brackets or values in parentheses or p values or p-values or standard errors. Otherwise, the examiner wouldn't know what is that. Another important point, each table, graph, results are to be discussed and connected to the main theme of the chapter. No table should be like hanging without any connection. So should not leave any of these unattended. A table there means it should be discussed. Not that give 5-10 tables, no discussion on it, and it's left to the examiner or whoever concerned to see what is inside. That is very bad. If you give a table, it should be discussed. What is there in the table should be made aware to the reader, and its implications should be brought out. So each result is to be substantiated with strong theoretical justification. See, result, anyone can get result. If we put our data in a software, we get result. Anyone can get. But how do we justify that result? So sometimes we say that they say that there is correlation between these two variables. Then if we, as examiner, if we ask, how do you justify that correlation? No, sir, this is what I got. That's not correct. We have to justify why there is correlation or why there is no correlation. We have to bring in theoretical inputs to it to justify our result. Okay. So as a researcher, it is our duty to defend our results. Okay. So that part is important. And give a short summary of each chapter. Suppose 30 pages I mentioned. So maybe at the end of each chapter, we can give a short summary, chapter summary. No need to conclude at that stage. Conclusion comes at the end. Conclusion we make on the basis of all research questions. After all research questions are addressed, we make conclusion. But we can give a short summary of things at the end of this chapter. So that would help the reader to get a grip of or a grasp of what has been discussed in this. And present each aspect in separate sections, because instead of continuously writing running matter, put 1.2, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, each aspect, and that should be a separate aspect. That would be nice. And last chapter is findings, conclusions, suggestions, implications. Okay, give only major findings as 12 to 16 points. See, I told you 3 major chapters of research objectives. So each objective, 3 to 4 findings would be fine. And these findings should be given in small paragraph. This is my idea. Okay, this is what I think would be better or would be helpful. So these points should be given. This should be a running matter in paragraph. It should feel that this came out from the discussion. Okay, when you discuss the results, some points emerge. Those points are presented as a summary, and this summary is 12 points or 16 points can be given as summary. So maybe 3-4 points from each chapter. I have seen PhD students giving 100 to 150 findings. If we go through those 150 findings, when we start and end, we don't get anything. That means what the student want to convey through these findings, we don't get any idea. Because 150 findings is not the finding we expect. Research findings means it's a major aspect based on your research questions. Okay? And if 150 findings means it's totally boring, and when we read more and more, we feel like we are going into more and more darkness. Instead of throwing light, it pushes into darkness. So based on the discussion, make major findings. Don't repeat what is given in the findings, in the discussion. From there, certain points should emerge. Okay, and from those further, that comes as conclusion. So your research findings should be related to your objective, research questions, and hypothesis. And conclusion chapter. Conclusions should come from your findings. Should not conclude something which is not related to your findings. Sometimes we find that students write in their conclusion certain things which not studied, was not part of the objective, but making conclusion. We should conclude only what we have found from our analysis. Okay. And 4 or 5 conclusions in 3 or 4 paragraphs are, small paragraphs are enough. Because that conclusion should be the final outcome, and it should have one-to-one relationship between objectives. You read objectives or research questions, or this was the research question, is the conclusion. Whether the question is addressed or not, we have to see. So before writing conclusion, we should write the objectives or research questions on the left side and write conclusions, whether it's properly addressed, whether all questions have been answered by doing the research work. Okay, then suggestions. Like that, suggestions should come from what you have studied. Should not make suggestions beyond the scope of study. Suggestions should be based on what we have studied. Should not make some suggestions. Okay, that's none of our business to make suggestions randomly without looking into what we have studied. What we have found out, on the basis only we can make suggestions. We should not make just any suggestion to anyone. Sometimes we see the suggestions which are not part of the study and not relevant also. Okay. Don't make 30, 40 suggestions. 4 to 5 good suggestions are fine. Okay. 4 to 5 good suggestions are fine. Who are we to give 30, 40 suggestions? PhD is a small work. And PhD is a learning process, first of all. And we should not make too many suggestions. Then limitations. Very often I have found limitations are put wrongly. Since there must be a subheading called limitations to be written, if limitations are not there, some examiners ask why you have not put limitations. So sometimes randomly put limitations without, they are not limitations only, but it's put as limitations. See, for example, suppose studies on urban cooperative banks in India, in Goa. That's the study objective. That researcher wanted to study only urban cooperative banks in Goa. But in limitation, sometimes you find we could not study urban cooperative banks in other states. It's not a limitation because that was not part of the study. So what is limitation? We have to identify. We should not put limitation in such a way that we could have studied. Then the examiner can ask, or the examiner while writing the report asks, sometimes he says that this is the limitation. Suppose that could have been done. The examiner can ask you do that and submit again. So limitations are, suppose you say that data is not available beyond this period, or this is not accessible. Okay, now, for example, you can put due to COVID, we could not conduct a field survey. That is a limitation. Okay, during that time. So limitation should be actual limitation, should not put just for sake of it. And referencing, follow style and all that, okay, you can prepare. There are different softwares which help you to do referencing. So in the beginning only you select those software. I don't know exactly what, but there are different softwares and all you can select that. So in the beginning only you start entering your works. Now so many Grammarly and all, not Grammarly, Mendeley. There are some softwares. It gives you perfect the style of citation, and so you can do that from the very beginning, so that at the end you have your references ready. Another point which I want to make here is that sometimes I find references at the end of each chapter, or bibliography at the end of each chapter, and at the end of the thesis also. It's just repetition, because you are giving at the end of the chapter and the same thing you are giving at the end of the thesis. But whichever, I have seen thesis from some good institutes and all, and I have also followed the same. Give references at the end of the thesis on. Give references at the end of the thesis only, and give only references. Earlier, we used to give bibliography. Bibliography means you can include the literature which you have read but not included. But these days, if you see research paper, you don't see any bibliography. You see only references. So whatever you have cited in the thesis, that only you include, or whatever you have cited in the research paper, only that you include in the references. So better to give only at the end. So how to put and all this I am going to show in the reference, in the afternoon session. Okay. So language skills and academic writing. Academic writing is very important, and you know that it's different from journalistic writing. Need special training in academic writing. So these days you find that there are many workshops conducted for academic writing. Even many publishers, journal publishers are having webinars, how to do academic writing. They help how to write and how to do all those things there. It's available, you can do that. And should have a plan to improve language skills along with your PhD program. Once you register for PhD program, if you are not very good in language, then try to improve that. Pay some attention to learn academic writing. When you read a research article, try to understand how they are writing, what kind of style they are using, and what kinds of words they are using, what are the terms they are using. Try to have a special attention to it. Then you learn, okay? And we can learn a lot from our PhD supervisor. So submit your work regularly to the supervisor and get it checked. See, when I was doing PhD, I have learned a lot from my supervisor. He used to edit very, very nicely and give back. And I correct and give back. Again, he edits and gives back. That way we try to learn the writing skills. Okay, these are all learning by doing. By birth, we don't get all these skills. So we have to get trained, and we have to practice, and thereby we get some idea. So learning academic writing is a process. It's a process of learning by doing, okay? Read more and more research papers, have to read between lines, and workshops on academic writing organized by reputed institutions and agencies. So there are Grammarly software which you can use. If your college is subscribing well and good, it's not very costly. You can ask your college to subscribe Grammarly, so you can do the spell check, grammar check, everything it does. Okay, it helps us to produce good research articles, because when we send the research article, if our language is very poor, the first site only they send back saying that they won't say that your language is bad or this, that. They will say that, no, your article is not suitable for our and send back. Okay. And also when you write thesis and all, don't elaborate too much. See, we should respect our audience. Who is going to read your thesis? Your thesis is going to be read by the people of your standard only, or higher standard. So we need not teach them. So in thesis writing, research paper writing, we should not repeat. We should not say that is, in other words, and all not required. Because in research article writing, space is very important. So we should not, once if we can express our idea in one sentence instead of 4 sentences, that one sentence is preferred, because that saves space. Okay? So that we should keep in mind. We should not elaborate too much. Okay. Then plagiarism tests, you know that there are different plagiarism test software. So should avoid plagiarism. I have seen that research scholars are too much scared of plagiarism test. They are worried about plagiarism, nothing to worry. I mean, if you are using, if you are writing your thesis in your own words or in your own language, if you are writing by your own, nothing to worry at all. Plagiarism won't come at all. Okay. Only in certain subjects, certain terms are captured, but there is limit up to 10% and all. So up to 10%, there is no issue. So mostly it won't exceed more than 10%. Don't keep too much attention towards that. Write in your own words, revise it, correct it, and then if you go ahead like that, you won't face any problem in plagiarism test. Okay, there are different softwares available. You can check, and whenever you find some plagiarism, you can correct it also. I mean, paraphrasing and all you can do. Now, publishing, I mean, it's, you know that it's very important to publish your articles in journals, but keep in mind that don't send your journals, I mean, don't send your work, which is very important, your hard work, to a predatory journal, paid journal, bad journal, because your works go waste. I know that it's quick yielding, you get your article published quickly, but in the long run, it may not benefit you, it may not help you. And suppose such a bad article or published in bad, an article, not bad, article may be good, but published in bad journal. And if that is there in your biodata, may bring down your value. So keep those things in mind. So send only publications to good journals so that you get credit. I mean, you get credit for that, for your work. Okay. So that is okay. This is something about, these are the good publishers where you should look for: Elsevier, Science Direct, Emerald, Sage, Taylor and Francis, Wiley, Springer, Cambridge Public, Oxford. I know that, I mean, it's not easy to get papers published in this, but I'm just informing if those who are interested should try in this to publish. Then preparing for YOC examination. I'm finishing in 2-3 minutes. Okay. Dr. Nidhi?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes.
3 to 3 minutes.
Yes, yes.
Now, preparing for YOC examination, this is the last. So I mentioned in the beginning, I mean, by introducing, it was mentioned starting from selection of topics to Viva, so I should finish this also. Should have an overall idea about thesis, methodology, results, findings, and conclusions. You should have a grasp of your thesis. You must know what you have written. You should have full control over the work you have done, then nothing to worry. Okay, generally, questions are sent to the guide. Generally, examiners send the questions to the guide or to the university. Most universities reveal the questions to the student. The questions are very philosophical. Even if you know the questions, it would be difficult for you to find answers to the questions. Such kind of questions are asked. They don't ask, what is this? The questions are asked in such a way that the student struggles to answer it. Therefore, mostly the questions are given to the students in advance. So they get a time of 15-20 days to prepare for that. Okay. And mostly the examiner asks questions from there only, but it's not necessary. Examiner can ask any question outside also, but generally these questions examiner asks, because they mention that questions, even when the report mentions, report format mentions questions to be asked at the time of Viva. So we mentioned 3 questions or 3, 4, 5 questions we mentioned, and that will be asked there. Okay, but students can come prepared for that. But still it will be difficult to answer. Okay, but some other questions could also be asked. It is free. He's free to ask any question from the thesis, get clarity on any aspect mentioned in the thesis. But prepare your work for 30 minutes. Prepare PPT very clearly and make presentation. But very important point, show the rigor of your thesis. Sometimes we find the thesis, in the PhD Viva presentation, some universities I have sent, they don't show any table, any model, anything, only findings, only running matter, objectives, hypothesis, major findings, conclusions, suggestions. From that, the examiner and others who are present for your thesis Viva won't understand the rigor of your work. So you should include your model, your data, your variables, your results. Tables and all should not explain too much, just show. As far as possible, you should show all your tables so that others get to know that you have done a lot of work. But don't spend time, just show for a second, this is the table. If somebody is interested, they will call back those tables and ask you a question. You should not explain each table and all, but we should show our work to others, because this is after 5-6 years of work we are presenting. Okay. So the presentation should reflect fully the work you have carried out. Okay, don't bother about whether audience would understand or not. That is none of your concern, because you are produced something which is great and you are presenting that. Others, I mean, the audience may be students or someone from public, he may understand or may not understand. So you need not explain everything in detail, but you show this is what. This is supposed to be mainly, Viva means you are presenting to the examiner mainly, and some learned people. So your target should be there. So don't explain too much and spend time, okay? So those who are interested would ask you questions if they need some clarification. Do some trials before going to final presentation, and don't take tension or stress because it will go through. If you know what you have done, nothing to worry. Okay. So give only questions raised by the experts from the audience and or from the audience. Sometimes I have seen some scholars get into problem, unnecessarily answering something, giving something, some examples to the point, whatever they are asked to give answer to that only. If they want more explanation, they will ask, then only you give answer. Don't get into problem by answering this and that. After PhD, what to do after PhD? See, let me stop by saying that PhD is a training. PhD is a training to do research. Okay, PhD is not an end in itself. It's just a beginning. You are learning how to do research. So that we examiners keep in mind always. If you strictly go by what students have done, PhD award a PhD will be difficult. But we know that it's a learning process. Okay, this is a learning process. From there you start doing better works. Okay, keep that in mind. So whatever you have learned during the PhD period, use that for further research and carry that till your end of your life. I don't say academic life. There are people who have retired also doing good research and publishing. Okay, so it's just a beginning. It's just a beginning, and you have to work hard. So most important thing during the PhD is what you learn. How you learn collecting data, how you learned review of literature, how you learned data analysis, and whether you have all those skills at the end of the PhD. That is the outcome from the PhD work. Okay, thank you very much. I'm stopping. I stop.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir. In fact, there are many questions also, and a lot of people are asking for, because this presentation was so full of content, and right from, selecting the topic, selecting the guide, data sources, process of collecting, analyzing, then chapterization, and you have dealt with each chapter very much in detail. And a lot of questions are there. So I request to all the participants, please understand that we are going YouTube live, and you can access it, the recording of today's session at any time on YouTube. I think a lot of things are there, and it is actually we all are too eager to join the next session now, which is on review of literature.
Yeah. So next we can discuss next session.
Yes, thank you
Because
very much for
session,
such informative sessions. And
I think Dharma Purikar, I think, Mr. Sir wants to raise, he has raised hand, I think. We'll see in the afternoon, sir.
Yes. We have shared your YouTube link already in the chat box, and whatever questions we are having, you can share it again, and we can take it up in the next session. So.
Okay. So see, I'll try to answer whatever questions possible for me to answer, because.
Would you like to answer?
I'll try.
Answer it now?
No, after
in the next session, right?
So, next session.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So as we all know that our next session will start at 2 p.m. sharp, and it is on review of literature, critical reading and review, and finding gaps. So it will be a very informative session, and we are looking forward for it, sir. So yeah, so Liji ma'am and Sudarshan sir, with your permission, can we conclude the session? Right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So whether I should close this or I'll keep it